My name is Sergeant Katie Walker. I am 27 years old. I used to defuse roadside bombs in Afghanistan, navigating heat, dust, and the constant threat of death. But I never imagined that the biggest bomb of my life would detonate right at my own dinner table. Yesterday, in the middle of the most crowded, trendy bistro in downtown Portland, Brandon, my fiancé, stood up and threw my 2-carat engagement ring directly into his glass of red wine. He didn't just drop it, he pitched it. Then he screamed, his voice cracking with staged desperation. "You are a crazy woman. I can't marry someone who might kill me in my sleep." As he yelled, he threw a quick, covert wink toward the table next to us. That was where his 3 best friends sat, their phones already raised, recording everything in landscape mode. He wanted me to cry. He wanted me to smash plates. He wanted to construct the perfect narrative of the unstable military wife, so he could have an excuse to chase after his hot 22-year-old secretary. But Brandon forgot one crucial thing. I am a logistics sergeant. I don't get angry. I gather data. And what I found in his iCloud later that night was enough to bury him forever. Comment: steal discipline below if you hate manipulators, and don't forget to subscribe to watch how I turn a canceled wedding into a funeral for his career. Time didn't just stop, it stretched, pulling apart like taffy. In the field, they teach you about the golden second, that heartbeat between hearing the click of a trigger and the actual explosion. You become hyper-aware. Your senses dial up to 11. That is exactly what happened in Le Bistro. I watched the ring arc through the air. It was a beautiful thing, vintage cut, platinum band. I watched it hit the surface of the Cabernet Sauvignon. There was a sickening plop, followed by a splash of dark red liquid that erupted from the glass. The wine hit the pristine white tablecloth like arterial spray. Violent, messy, permanent. For a moment, the only sound in the restaurant was the ambient clatter of silverware and the low hum of indie folk music playing over the speakers. Then, Brandon's voice shattered the atmosphere again. "Look at you," he shouted, pointing a manicured finger at my face. He was wearing his navy blue power suit, the one I had ironed for him that morning. "You're staring right through me. It's the PTSD, isn't it? You're having an episode. I can't live like this, Katie. I'm terrified of you." The hush that fell over the restaurant was immediate and suffocating. I could feel the eyes, dozens of them. The couple at the window table stopped chewing their kale salads. The waiter froze, a pitcher of water hovering over a glass. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, a physical burn that started at my neck and clawed its way up. This was it, the public execution of my dignity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My first instinct, my human instinct, was to beg, to reach out and grab his hand, to ask, "Baby, what's wrong? Why are you doing this?" The pain was a physical blow to the gut, sharp and breathtaking. This was the man I had shared a bed with for 4 years, the man who held me when I had nightmares about Kandahar. Now, he was using those nightmares as a weapon to gut me in public. But then, my eyes shifted. Target acquisition. I looked past Brandon's fake, contorted face to the table on his left. Tyler and Josh. Brandon's Alpha Brotherhood. They weren't looking at Brandon with concern. They weren't looking at me with pity. They were looking at their screens. The little ring lights on their phone cases were on. Tyler was mouthing words to an invisible audience. I could almost see the caption floating in the air above his head. "Watch my boy dodge a bullet. Psycho wife alert." They were smiling. A cruel, tight little smirk played on Josh's lips. It hit me with the force of a shockwave. This wasn't a breakup. This was a production. A scene scripted, rehearsed, and now performed live for an audience of strangers and internet trolls. The pain in my gut didn't vanish, but it froze. It crystallized into something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. Switch. That's what we call it in logistics. You switch off the panic, you switch off the fear, you focus on the inventory, you focus on the supply chain, you focus on the objective. My objective right now was simple. Do not give the enemy the footage he wants. Brandon was panting now, waiting. He needed the reaction shot. He needed me to throw the wine in his face. He needed me to flip the table. He needed a clip that would go viral on TikTok, validating his victimhood. I looked down at my plate. The filet mignon was cooked medium rare, perfectly seared. I had only eaten half of it. It was $45. My hand was shaking. I watched my own fingers, trembling slightly. Discipline, Walker, I told myself. Lock it down. I forced my hand to stop. I gripped the silver fork until my knuckles turned white, draining the blood from my skin. I picked up my steak knife. The screech of the knife cutting against the ceramic plate was loud in the silent room. Scrape, slice. Brandon blinked. He faltered. Did you hear me? I said we're done. I didn't look up. I speared the piece of steak I had just cut. I brought it to my mouth. I chewed, slowly, deliberately. I tasted the rosemary butter. I tasted the char. I swallowed. The silence in the room shifted from awkward to confused. This wasn't in the script. The cameramen, Tyler and Josh, exchanged a nervous glance. Their psycho subject was eating dinner. It's hard to make a viral video about a woman quietly enjoying a steak. I took the linen napkin from my lap and dabbed the corner of my mouth. No rushing, no drama, just procedure. Then I stood up. I smoothed down the front of my dress. It was the emerald green silk one Brandon said he liked because it matched his eyes. I looked at the wine glass. The ring was still at the bottom, submerged in the dark red liquid. I didn't reach for it. That was a sunk cost. I looked up and locked eyes with Brandon. For the first time, I saw fear flicker behind his bravado. He didn't know what to do with a target that didn't bleed. I kept my voice low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. In a room this quiet, a whisper is louder than a scream. Great acting, Brandon, I said, but you forgot your lines. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air on a dock. I turned on my heel. Military precision. Left foot, right foot, head high, shoulders back. I walked past Tyler and Josh. I looked directly into Tyler's camera lens as I passed, giving him nothing but a blank, bored expression. I walked out of the heavy oak doors of the bistro and into the cool, damp Portland night air. The valet saw me coming and scrambled for my keys. I took them without a word. I got into my car, my sanctuary, my forward operating base. I slammed the door shut. The sound was final. A thunderclap in a small box. The silence of the car rushed in to fill the void. The smell of leather and old coffee, the safety of isolation. And that's when the shaking started. It started in my hands, then seized my chest. I gasped for air, clutching the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me tethered to the earth. The adrenaline crash was coming, and it was going to hurt. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I looked in the rearview mirror. My eyes were wide, shocked, but dry. I reached for my phone. It buzzed. A notification from Facebook. Brandon had already posted. Status update, heartbroken. Sometimes love isn't enough when mental health is involved. He had blocked me. I stared at the glowing screen in the dark car. A cold smile, devoid of any humor, touched my lips. You think you won because you grabbed the microphone first, I whispered to the empty car. But you forgot, Brandon. I handle the logistics. I opened my laptop bag on the passenger seat. The war hadn't ended in that restaurant. It had just begun. The silence inside the car was heavier than a flak jacket. The moment the heavy door slammed shut, cutting off the ambient noise of Portland's nightlife, the adrenaline crash hit me like a physical blow. The logistics sergeant, who had coolly eaten a piece of steak just 3 minutes ago, vanished. In her place was a woman shaking so violently that her teeth chattered. It's a physiological reaction. An adrenal dump. Your body prepares for combat, fight, or flight. And when the threat doesn't involve physical violence, that energy has nowhere to go. It turns inward. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, trying to ground myself. I looked up into the rearview mirror. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. She was wearing a silk slip dress that cost more than my first car. Her hair was grown out long, styled in soft romantic waves because Brandon said short hair looked too aggressive. Her makeup was flawless, hiding the faint tan lines from my last deployment. "Who are you?" I whispered to the reflection. "What have you let him do to you?" The silence of the car became a projector screen, and the memories started to play. Not the happy ones, not the vacations or the holidays, but the small, sharp moments I had ignored, the red flags I'd painted white to surrender to the idea of a happy marriage. I remembered the charity gala 6 months ago. I had come downstairs wearing a vintage jumpsuit, sleek, elegant, but powerful. I felt good. I felt like myself. Brandon had been waiting by the door, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. It was that tight, patronizing look he gave waitstaff when they messed up an order. "Is that what you're wearing?" he had asked. Not a question, a judgment. "I like it," I said, smoothing the fabric. "It has pockets." "It looks masculine, Katie," he sighed, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. "Tonight is about networking. I need you to be the charming fiancé, not the drill sergeant. Go put on the pink dress, the one that shows your legs, and soften your walk, please. You stride like you're clearing a room." I had changed. I had changed the dress. I had shortened my stride. I had softened my voice. Why? Because I wanted peace. Because I told myself that marriage was about compromise. But looking back now, in the cold light of the street lamps, I realized it wasn't compromise. It was erasure. Then came the memory of the scar. It's a jagged, ugly thing on my left shoulder, a souvenir from a piece of shrapnel that missed my neck by an inch. To me, it's a badge of survival. To Brandon, it was a defect in the product. I remembered lying in bed a month ago. He was tracing his finger over my skin, and when he hit the scar tissue, he flinched. Just a micro movement, but I felt it. "You know," he had whispered, pretending to be caring. "I have a client who owns a med spa. He does amazing laser work. He could smooth this out for you before the wedding. You wouldn't have to worry about the photos." "I'm not worried about the photos, Brandon," I had said. "Well, I just want you to feel beautiful," he countered. But he meant he wanted me to look perfect. The realization hit me harder than the breakup itself. Brandon didn't love me. He didn't love Sergeant Katie Walker, the woman who could organize a supply chain for a battalion in a sandstorm. He didn't love the woman who had nightmares. He didn't love the woman who preferred whiskey to white wine. He loved the brand of me. He loved being able to tell his clients, "My wife is a hero," because it gave him borrowed valor. It made him look patriotic and tough by association. He loved the idea of the soldier, but he hated the reality of the war. He wanted the medal, but he didn't want the scar. I was just another asset in his portfolio. A high-value acquisition to boost his social standing among the alpha male wannabes he listened to on podcasts during his morning commute. Men who preached that a wife should be submissive, decorative, and silent. 4 years, I choked out, the tears finally spilling over. I spent 4 years trying to fold myself into a shape that would fit in his pocket. My chest heaved. The sobbing was ugly, raw, and guttural. It was the sound of a structural failure. I let it happen. I let the grief wash over me for exactly 5 minutes. Then a sound cut through the dark. Ping! A notification on my phone. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, smearing the expensive mascara. I picked up the phone. It was a Facebook notification. Brandon. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to throw the phone out the window. But the logistics sergeant in me took over. Intel. Gather intel. I opened the app. There it was. A photo of a black square, the universal symbol for "I'm sad, give me attention." And the caption. "It is with a heavy heart that I announce the end of my engagement to Katie." Sometimes love isn't enough when you're dealing with severe mental health battles. I tried my best to save her from her demons, but tonight things got violent. Please respect our privacy and hers as she seeks the help she desperately needs. Mental health awareness. Heartbroken. I read it twice. The tears stopped instantly. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, burning sensation in the pit of my stomach. He was doing it. He was playing the crazy veteran card. He was preemptively destroying my reputation to cover up his infidelity. He was painting himself as the martyr, the saintly boyfriend who tried to save the broken soldier, while simultaneously labeling me as violent and unstable. He had blocked me from commenting, of course. He wanted to control the narrative. He wanted to be the victim. I looked at the timestamps. He must have typed this draft while we were still sitting at the table, probably while I was eating that steak. "You want privacy, Brandon?" I whispered, my voice raspy but steady. I looked into the rearview mirror again. The stranger in the silk dress was gone. Her eyes were hard now. Her jaw was set. The shaking had stopped completely. "You asked for privacy," I said, shifting the car into gear, "but you posted it on a public forum." I didn't drive home. I drove toward the one place where emotions didn't matter, only facts did. I was going to my laptop. The mourning period was over. The operation had begun. If you have ever felt like someone loved the idea of you, the image they could show off to the world, but tried to change everything that made you real behind closed doors, please hit that like button right now. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What was the moment you realized you were just a prop in their life story? Let's support each other below. I didn't drive home. Home was a combat zone I wasn't ready to secure yet. Instead, I pulled into the empty, floodlit parking lot of a 24-hour Walgreens about 3 miles from the bistro. It was a neutral ground, anonymous, safe. I reached into the back seat and pulled my laptop bag onto my lap. My hands were steady now. The shaking from the adrenaline dump had passed, replaced by a cold, humming focus. This was a feeling I knew well. It was the same feeling I had when I sat down to analyze a supply route in Kandahar, looking for anomalies, looking for threats. I opened the MacBook Pro. The screen flared to life, casting a ghostly blue pallor over the dark interior of my car. Brandon, for all his talk about being a detail-oriented sales director, was sloppy with his operational security, OPSEC. Because we were engaged, because we were supposed to be a team, we shared everything. Bank accounts, Amazon Prime. And most fatally for him, an Apple family sharing plan. He hadn't kicked me off yet. Arrogance. He assumed I was currently somewhere crying my eyes out, too emotional to think about digital footprints. He thought I was a crazy woman, and crazy women don't check metadata. I typed in his password. B. Miller Sales King, 88. Narcissist. The cloud synced. The little wheel spun for a few seconds, and then the digital life of Brandon Miller unfolded before me. "Okay, Brandon," I whispered, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. "Let's see what you're really made of." I didn't go for the photos first. I went for the files. I opened his personal iCloud drive. I sorted by date modified. Right at the top, edited 3 hours ago, was a folder named Project Freedom. My stomach turned over, a slow, sickening roll. I clicked it. Inside was an Excel spreadsheet titled Exit Strategy Final V3.xlsx. He hadn't just decided to leave me tonight. He'd been planning this for a fiscal quarter. I opened the spreadsheet. It was a masterpiece of calculation. Columns for assets, liabilities, and timeline. Row 4, engagement ring. Note, buy insurance. If she throws it, claim loss. If I take it back, sell for 60% value. Row 12, apartment lease. Note, break lease in June, blame her instability to landlord to avoid penalty fees. Row 25, the narrative. Note, plant seeds with Josh and Tyler about her PTSD episodes. Make sure to use words like unsafe and volatile in text for paper trail. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't a breakup. It was a hostile takeover. He had monetized our relationship and calculated the depreciation of my heart. He had planned to frame me as mentally unstable, not because it was true, but because it was cost-effective. "You calculated bastard," I hissed. I closed the spreadsheet before I could punch the screen. I needed to go deeper. I opened the Messages app. Since his phone was synced to the cloud and he was currently online, the blue bubbles were updating in real time. There was a thread pinned to the top. Jessica, work. Jessica was his 22-year-old executive assistant, the one who brought him coffee and laughed too hard at his jokes at the office Christmas party. I had asked him about her once. "She's a kid, Katie. Gross. Stop being jealous," he had said. I scrolled back. Not days, months. Brandon, 3 months ago. God, she's wearing the fatigues again. She thinks she looks tough, but she just looks like a man. I need something soft. I need you. Jessica. Poor baby. You deserve a real woman who knows how to take care of her alpha. Come over after work. I bought that lingerie you liked. Brandon. On my way, I told the drill sergeant I have a late client dinner. The drill sergeant. That was his pet name for me, not sweetheart, not honey. The drill sergeant. I read on. They mocked my cooking. They mocked the way I organized the pantry. They mocked the nightmares I had. Jessica, yesterday. Are you really going to do it at the bistro? Isn't that mean? Brandon. It has to be public, babe. If I do it at home, who sees it? If I do it there, I have witnesses. Tyler is going to film it. Once everyone sees she's crazy, nobody will blame me for moving on with you. It's perfect marketing. Perfect marketing. I felt bile rise in my throat. I had to swallow hard to keep from vomiting on the dashboard. This was the man I had ironed shirts for. The man I had held when he had the flu. He wasn't just cheating, he was building a brand on my destruction. But the final nail in the coffin wasn't a text. It was in the recently deleted folder in his Photos app. He had deleted it just before we met for dinner, probably to clear space or remove evidence, but he forgot to empty the trash can. It was a video file. IMG 49 twinto emails wavals. I put in my AirPods. I needed to hear this clearly. I pressed play. The video opened. It was Brandon, standing in the bathroom of our apartment. He was wearing the same suit he wore tonight. He was holding his phone, filming himself in the mirror. "You're crazy!" Brandon yelled at his own reflection. Then he stopped. He shook his head. "No, too aggressive. Try again." He took a breath, composed his face into a mask of tragic sadness. He furrowed his brow. He even squeezed his eyes shut for a second to make them look watery. "Katie, look at you," he said to the mirror, his voice trembling with fake fear. "You're scaring me. I can't do this anymore. You're unstable." He paused, looked at the camera, and smirked. "Yeah, that's the one. That'll get the sympathy vote." The video ended. I sat there in the silence of the Walgreens parking lot, the AirPods still in my ears. I didn't feel like crying anymore. The sadness was gone. It had been incinerated by the heat of a rage so pure, so cold, it felt like liquid nitrogen running through my veins. He had rehearsed it. He had practiced breaking my heart the way an actor practices a monologue for an audition. "Okay," I said aloud. My voice sounded different, deeper, harder. I reached into my bag and pulled out my external hard drive, a rugged military-grade LaCi drive I used for backups. I didn't smash the computer. I didn't delete his files. I didn't send him an angry text. I plugged in the drive. I dragged the exit strategy folder. Copying. I dragged the entire message thread with Jessica. Copying. I dragged the rehearsal video. Copying. I followed the 3-2-1 backup rule. 3 copies of data, 2 different media types, 1 offsite. I saved a copy to the drive, a copy to my own encrypted cloud, and a copy to a hidden folder on my local drive. The progress bar moved across the screen. Green. Complete. I ejected the drive and put it safely into my pocket. I closed the laptop. The blue light vanished, plunging me back into the darkness. Brandon wanted a show. He wanted a narrative. He wanted to use media and perception to destroy me. He thought he was playing 4D chess, but he didn't realize he had just declared war on a logistics sergeant. He had the script. But I had the data. And in war, data is ammunition. I picked up my phone. It was time to mobilize the troops. I scrolled past Brandon's name and stopped at a contact I hadn't called in months, mostly because Brandon didn't like her. I pressed call. Addison, I said when the voice answered. We need to talk. The phone rang exactly once before it was answered. Katie. The voice on the other end was breathless, frantic, and barely audible over the sound of what sounded like a bathroom fan whirring in the background. It was Addison, Brandon's 24-year-old sister. I'm here, Addie, I said, leaning back against the headrest of my car. Oh my God, thank God you called, Addison choked out a sob. He's crazy, Katie. He's actually lost his mind. He's calling everyone. He's on the phone with Aunt Linda right now. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. What is he saying? He's telling them. She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. He's telling them that he had to leave the restaurant because he feared for his life. He told Mom that you threatened to go to your car and get your service pistol. He said you were going to shoot him, Katie. I closed my eyes. Of course, he wasn't just painting me as unstable, he was painting me as a lethal threat. He was weaponizing my service record. It was a classic Darvo maneuver: deny, attack, reverse victim, and defender. I don't even own a personal firearm anymore, Addie. I turned it in when I left active duty, I said calmly. You know that? I know, Addison cried. I know he's lying. I told Mom that, but she's enabling him like she always does. She's already asking if we can get a refund on the catering. A silence hung between us for a second. Why are you telling me this, Addie? I asked softly. He's your brother. Because he's a monster, she said, her voice hardening. And because I saw the receipt. My eyes snapped open. What receipt? Check your email. I just forwarded it to you. I shouldn't have. I was helping him organize his tax documents for the wedding write-offs last week, and I saw it in his inbox. I pulled the phone away from my ear and switched to my email app. There it was. A forwarded email from Addison. Subject: FW. Your receipt from Cartier Portland. I opened it. It was a receipt for a solitary diamond ring. The date was 2 days ago. The price was $8,500, but it wasn't the price that made my blood run cold. It was the payment method. Payment, Visa ending in 4492. That was our joint savings account. The house fund. The money we had been saving for a down payment on a craftsman bungalow in the Pearl District. Every month, I deposited 40% of my paycheck into that account. He had used my money to buy an engagement ring for his mistress. He bought it for her, didn't he? Addison asked, her voice trembling. For that Jessica girl. Yes, I said. The rage in my chest was no longer a fire, it was a solid block of ice. He financed his infidelity with my savings. I'm so sorry, Katie, I hate him. I swear to God, I hate him. Addison sniffled. What are we going to do? Do we cancel the wedding? Do you want me to call the guests? No, I said instantly. The plan clicked into place in my mind like a magazine loading into a rifle. Do not call anyone. Do not cancel anything. What? But listen to me, Addie. Act normal. Pretend you believe him. If he asks, you haven't heard from me. I'm a ghost. Katie, what are you planning? I'm planning a reallocation of assets, I said. I'll be in touch. I hung up. I didn't have time to dwell on the financial theft yet. I needed physical backup. I started the car and drove. Not to my apartment. Brandon had a key. I drove to the one place in Portland where I knew I would be safe. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the driveway of a small, messy duplex on the east side of the river. Before I could even turn off the engine, the front door flew open. Natalie stood there. She was 5'2", wore oversized sweatpants, and had a messy bun that defied gravity. She was a former combat engineer who could build a bridge under fire and drink any Marine under the table. She didn't say a word. She just marched down the driveway, ripped open my car door, and pulled me into a hug that cracked my ribs. I saw the live stream, she growled into my hair. Josh posted it. I already reported it for harassment, but it's been shared 500 times. She pulled back, holding me by the shoulders. Her eyes were fierce. I have a shovel, a bag of lime, and an alibi. Just say the word. Despite everything, a small, genuine smile touched my lips. No lime, Nat. No shovel. Okay, then I have a baseball bat and a very bad temper, she offered. We can go smash the windows of his precious BMW 5 Series. I know exactly where he parks. Tempting, I admitted, stepping out of the car. But he'd just sue me and use it as proof that I'm crazy. We're not going to play his game. We're not going to be the crazy exes. We walked into her living room. It smelled of lemon pledge and dog fur. Natalie went to the fridge and pulled out 2 cold PBRs. She cracked one open and handed it to me. So, what's the ROE? Natalie asked, using the military acronym for Rules of Engagement. She sat on the coffee table, looking at me with the intensity of a soldier waiting for a mission briefing. I took a long sip of the cheap beer. It tasted like loyalty. The wedding is in 6 days, I said. Everything is paid for, the venue, the catering, the DJ. It's non-refundable. So, let it burn, Natalie shrugged. No, I shook my head. Brandon thinks I'm going to hide. He thinks I'm going to curl up in a ball and disappear so he can spin his narrative of the tragic hero who escaped a psycho. I pulled my phone out and opened the calendar app. The date was circled in red. The big day. If I cancel, he wins, I explained. He gets the sympathy. He gets to keep the deposits. He gets to control the story. I looked at Natalie. We aren't canceling the event, Nat. We are rebranding it. Natalie cocked her head. Rebranding? The guests are coming. The family's coming. His biggest clients are coming, I said, my voice steady. They are expecting a show, so we are going to give them one, but it won't be a wedding. What is it going to be? A sit-rep, I said cold. A full, public, data-driven situation report on Brandon Miller. Natalie's eyes widened. A slow, wicked grin spread across her face. She raised her beer can. I like it, she said. It's psychological warfare, my favorite. I need you to run interference, I instructed. I need you to get into the venue early. I need access to the AV system. Can you handle the tech guy? Katie, Natalie scoffed. I used to wire explosives for a living. I can handle a DJ booth. Good. I reached into my bag and pulled out the physical invitation I'd kept as a keepsake. It was heavy cardstock, cream-colored, with gold foil lettering. Together with their families, Brandon and Katie invite you. I took a red Sharpie from Natalie's coffee table. With a single, decisive stroke, I crossed out the word wedding. Underneath it, in block letters, I wrote, Target acquisition. Let's get to work, I said. The next morning, I didn't wake up feeling like a heartbroken fiancé. I woke up feeling like a project manager with a deadline. My phone was already buzzing on the nightstand. It was Sasha, our wedding planner. She sounded like she was hyperventilating. Katie, oh my God, I heard the rumors. Brandon's mother called the caterer and tried to switch the menu to a bereavement buffet. Is the wedding off? Do I need to cancel the florists? We're past the cancellation window for the peonies, honey, so you're going to eat that cost. I put the phone on speaker and walked into the kitchen, grabbing a black coffee. Sasha, breathe, I said, my voice calm and commanding. Do not cancel the florists. Do not cancel the caterer. And tell Brandon's mother that if she touches the menu, I will invoice her for the difference. There was a stunned silence on the other end. So, the wedding is still on? The event is still on, I corrected her. But the concept has changed. We are pivoting. Pivoting? Sasha asked, confused. To what? Rustic chic? Bohemian? No, I said, looking at the calendar on my wall. We are pivoting to shock and awe. Keep the venue, keep the guest list, especially the guest list. But I need you to change the lighting. No more soft pink gels. I want stark white spotlights. Like an interrogation room, but expensive. Okay, Sasha said slowly, clearly thinking I had snapped. And the music? Cancel the string quartet. Keep the DJ, but tell him I'm sending a specific playlist. And Sasha? If Brandon calls, tell him everything is proceeding per the original contract. Don't let him know about the pivot. I work for you, Katie. You signed the checks, Sasha said, her professional loyalty kicking in. I'll handle it. I hung up. Phase 1, secure the venue. Complete. Phase 2, the uniform. I walked into the guest room where my wedding dress was hanging. It was a massive billowing ball gown made of layers upon layers of tulle and lace. Brandon had picked it out. He said it made me look like a princess. Looking at it now, I realized it just made me look like a meringue. It was heavy, suffocating, and impossible to move in without help. It was a dress designed for a woman who needed to be carried. I took it off the hanger. I didn't feel sentimental. I felt like I was disposing of hazardous waste. I stuffed the thousands of dollars of tulle into a heavy-duty trash bag. Then, I went to my closet. I pushed aside the floral sundresses and soft cardigans Brandon liked. I reached into the back, where I kept the clothes I bought with my own money, the clothes that made me feel like me. I pulled out a white suit. It wasn't just a suit. It was an Italian wool tuxedo, tailored to within an inch of its life. Sharp lapels, cigarette pants, a jacket that nipped in at the waist and structured the shoulders like armor. I put it on. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a bride. I saw a commander. I saw a woman who could negotiate a hostage release or bankrupt a company before lunch. That's better, I whispered. Phase 3. The payload. By noon, Natalie had turned my living room into a tactical operations center. We had an assembly line going on the dining table. Okay, so let me get this straight, Natalie said, stuffing a USB drive into a small manila envelope. Instead of Jordan almonds, which break your teeth anyway, the guests are getting these. Exactly, I said, sealing an envelope with a gold wax stamp. Information is the most valuable gift you can give. We had prepared 150 party favors. Inside each envelope was a carefully curated selection of the data I had harvested from the cloud. A photocopy of the exit strategy spreadsheet. A transcript of the text messages where Brandon mocked his own clients. And a QR code that linked directly to the video of him rehearsing his fake breakup. We placed the envelopes in a basket that used to hold flower petals. They looked innocuous, elegant even. You know, Natalie said, holding one up to the light. This is diabolical. Most people just key the car. Amateurs key cars, I said, checking the inventory count. Professionals destroy reputations. These dossiers will be placed under every chair at the ceremony. By the time they realize it's not a program, it'll be too late. Phase 4. Psychological warfare. The final step was the most crucial. I needed to ensure attendance. I needed to make sure Brandon didn't get suspicious and convince people not to come. I opened my laptop and logged into the wedding website's admin portal. I pulled up the guest email list. It was a goldmine of contacts, his boss, his biggest clients, his entire extended family. I drafted a new email blast. Subject: Important update regarding the Miller-Walker wedding, dear friends and family. There have been rumors circulating regarding the status of our nuptials. We know emotions run high before a big day. We are writing to confirm that the event this Saturday is absolutely still happening. In fact, we have planned a special surprise presentation that will reveal the absolute truth of our journey together. You do not want to miss this. It will be a night of total transparency. Please arrive on time. The doors will lock at 6 p.m. for the presentation. With love, Katie. It was perfect. It was vague enough to sound reassuring, but specific enough to trigger curiosity. Total transparency sounds like a romantic vow renewal to a guest, but to a liar like Brandon, it sounds like a threat. I hovered my mouse over the Send to All button. My heart rate didn't even spike. I thought about the ring in the wine glass. I thought about the drill sergeant texts. I thought about the way he looked at me when he told me I was broken. Fire for effect, I whispered. I clicked send. Whoosh. The sound of the email flying out into the digital ether was more satisfying than any artillery round I had ever fired. Within seconds, it would be hitting inboxes all over Portland. Brandon's phone would start blowing up. He would be confused. He would be terrified. He would wonder if I was bluffing or if I was planning to beg for him back. He wouldn't know what to do. And a confused enemy is a defeated enemy. I closed the laptop and looked at Natalie. The trap is set, I said. Now, we wait. In modern warfare, information is power. But sometimes the lack of information is a weapon of mass destruction. We call it radio silence. 10 seconds after I hit send on that email blast regarding the rebranded event, the first shell landed. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Then again, then again. Within a minute, it was vibrating so hard it was dancing across the wood surface like a nervous beetle. It was Brandon. I didn't pick up. I didn't even look at the screen. I simply reached over, flipped the phone face down, and continued drinking my coffee. The silence on my end was absolute. But on his end, I knew exactly what was happening. It was chaos. I knew Brandon's psychological profile better than he knew himself. He was a classic narcissist with a fragile ego wrapped in an alpha male coating. To a man like that, being ignored is worse than being screamed at. If I had screamed, he could have labeled me hysterical. If I had begged, he could have labeled me pathetic. But I was doing neither. I was a ghost. And ghosts are terrifying because you can't predict where they will strike next. Later that evening, I sat in my living room. The lights dimmed low. I finally picked up the phone to assess the damage. 72 missed calls, 45 text messages, 12 voicemails. I scrolled through the text thread. It was a fascinating case study in the narcissistic spiral. 6:05 p.m. What did you send to my boss? Total transparency? Are you out of your mind? Pick up the phone right now, Katie. You are embarrassing yourself. 6:30 p.m. Everyone is calling me asking if you're okay. I'm trying to protect you here, but you're making it really hard. Just cancel the email and tell them you had a breakdown. It's the only way to save your reputation. 7:15 p.m. Look, babe, let's just talk. Maybe we rushed things. I can come over. We can work this out. Just delete the email. 8:45 p.m. If you show up at that venue on Saturday, I will have security remove you. I'm serious. Don't test me. You're just a grunt, Katie. You don't have the resources to fight me. I read them all. My thumb hovered over the read status setting on my iPhone. In the civilian world, read receipts are annoying. In my world, right now, they were a tactical tool. I made sure send read receipts was turned off. He would see delivered, but he would never see read. He wouldn't know if I had seen his threats. He wouldn't know if I was laughing, crying, or sleeping. He was shouting into a void, and the void wasn't shouting back. My phone pinged again. This time, it was a secure message from Addison. Intel report, she typed. He's spiraling. He's drinking scotch and yelling at Jessica. She's freaking out. She thinks you know about them. She keeps asking him, what if she has photos? I smiled. Good. Paranoia is a slow-acting poison. What did he tell her? I texted back. He told her to shut up, Addison replied. He said, she's bluffing. She's just a dumb soldier. She organizes boxes for a living. She doesn't know how to play 4D chess. Dumb soldier, I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. I reached to the top shelf and pulled out an old, battered wooden box. It smelled of cedar, wax, and memories. It was my shoe shine kit. I carried it to the center of the living room floor. I laid down a newspaper, the Portland Mercury, to protect the rug. Then, I went to the spot by the door where my combat boots used to sit. Tonight, there was a different pair of shoes waiting there. My wedding shoes. They weren't the delicate, lace-covered kitten heels Brandon's mother had suggested. They were 4-inch patent leather stilettos, sharp enough to puncture a tire, dangerous, lethal. I sat cross-legged on the floor. It was 11 p.m., the night before the battle. I popped the tin of black kiwi shoe polish. The smell hit me instantly, chemical, sharp, and oddly comforting. It smelled like basic training. It smelled like discipline. I wrapped a soft cotton cloth around my index and middle fingers. I dipped it into the water, then the wax. Small circles. I began to polish the heel of the stiletto. Round and round. The friction generated heat. The heat melted the wax. The wax filled the pores of the leather. Clockwise, pressure, release. This was my meditation. While Brandon was likely pacing his penthouse apartment, shouting at his mistress, drowning in his own anxiety, I was here, sitting on the floor, polishing my armor. A soldier doesn't go into battle with scuffed boots. It's a sign of disrespect to the mission and to yourself. You think I organize boxes, Brandon? I murmured, the repetitive motion of my hand lulling me into a state of hyperfocus. I organize chaos. I organize consequences. I worked on the shoes for an hour, layer after layer, spit shine, until the black leather wasn't just shiny, it was a mirror. I could see my own reflection in the toe of the shoe. My eyes looked tired, yes, but they were clear. There is a specific kind of calm that comes before a breach. It's the moment when the planning is done. The explosives are set, the team is in position. There is nothing left to do but wait for the signal. I set the shoes down on the newspaper. They gleamed in the dim light like two obsidian knives. I picked up my phone one last time. One new message from Brandon. 11:58 p.m. Please, Katie, just tell me what you're going to do. I looked at the time, 11:59 p.m. I didn't reply. I turned the phone off completely. 000. It was Saturday, D-Day. The time for talk was over. The time for logistics had passed. Now, it was time for execution. I stood up, stretched my back, and looked at the gleaming shoes. I'm going to ruin you, I said softly into the silence. And then, I went to sleep. Have you ever dealt with a toxic person who couldn't stand being ignored? Did you know that your silence is often more powerful than your words? If you are ready to see Brandon get what he deserves, smash that like button. And tell me in the comments, what is your favorite way to handle a manipulator? Do you block them, or do you let them talk to the void? Comment, silence is power if you are Team Katie. The venue was perfect. It was an industrial chic event space in the Pearl District, with exposed brick walls, vaulted ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the rain-slicked streets of Portland. Usually for a wedding, this room would be bathed in soft, amber candlelight. It would smell of peonies and expensive perfume. It would be filled with the gentle, murmured anticipation of two families coming together. Tonight, however, the vibe was different. I had instructed the lighting crew to keep the house lights cool and dim, while 6 high-intensity spotlights cut through the darkness like prison searchlights. The music wasn't a string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. It was a low, thrumming bass track, something cinematic, something that sounded less like a celebration and more like the soundtrack to a heist. I stood in the shadows of the mezzanine, looking down at the kill zone. My watch read 17:45, 15 minutes to each hour. The guests were arriving. It was a fascinating sociological experiment. You could tell immediately who knew the rumors and who didn't. Brandon's family arrived in a tight phalanx. His mother wore a beige dress and a pinched expression, clutching her purse as if she expected someone to try and snatch it. She whispered furiously to Brandon's father, who looked like he would rather be undergoing a root canal without anesthesia. Then came the corporate crowd. The partners from Brandon's sales firm, men in $5,000 suits who checked their Rolexes every 30 seconds. They were here for the open bar and the networking. They didn't care about the bride or the groom. They cared about the merger. And then, there were my people. Natalie had positioned herself near the DJ booth, looking surprisingly elegant in a black jumpsuit, though I knew she had a Ka-bar knife strapped to her thigh. A group of my old unit buddies stood near the bar. They weren't drinking. They were scanning the room. Their posture was relaxed, but their eyes were alert. They knew this wasn't a wedding. They knew it was an operation. I saw them notice the envelopes. Underneath every single Chiavari chair, tucked neatly onto the seat cushion, was the manila envelope we had prepared. I watched as Mr. Henderson, Brandon's biggest client, picked his up, frowned at the confidential stamp, and then set it back down. He probably thought it was a quirky menu. 17:55. The heavy double doors swung open. The air in the room seemed to be sucked out in a single, collective gasp. Brandon had arrived. And he wasn't alone. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its sheer lack of shame. Brandon strode into the room wearing a midnight blue tuxedo, looking every inch the grieving, magnanimous hero he had painted himself to be. But on his arm, clinging to him like a barnacle in a red satin dress, was Jessica. She looked terrified and triumphant, all at once. The dress was inappropriate for a wedding, too short, too tight, a screaming, "Look at me" red that clashed with the tasteful neutrals of the room. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Is that? Did he bring her? I thought this was a reconciliation dinner. Brandon didn't seem to notice the shock. Or maybe he did, and he fed on it. He walked straight toward Mr. Henderson, flashing his $1,000,000 sales smile. From my vantage point, I could read his lips perfectly. "So glad you could make it, John," Brandon said, shaking the older man's hand while keeping a proprietary hand on Jessica's waist. "It's been a rough week. Katie is... well, she's trying. I agreed to come tonight to support her closure. She's a bit fragile, you know. Can't let go." Mr. Henderson looked at Jessica, then back at Brandon. His expression wasn't friendly, it was calculating. "Interesting choice of date, Brandon." "Oh, Jessica." Brandon laughed, a hollow, barking sound. "She's my rock, my executive assistant. She's been helping me navigate this whole mess with Katie's mental health. A true professional." I felt a cold smile touch my lips. A true professional. Brandon moved through the room, shaking hands, accepting condolences for a breakup that he had orchestrated. He looked at his watch. He looked at the empty stage. He looked impatient. He wanted the show to start so he could watch me cry, reject me publicly, and then leave with his prize. He wanted a scene. 18 I spoke into my headset. "Natalie, cut it." The low bass music cut out instantly. The room plunged into silence. Then, the house lights died. Total darkness. A few people gasped. Someone dropped a glass, the shatter echoing loudly in the black void. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the PA system. It wasn't the DJ, it was a pre-recorded announcement I had made. "Please take your seats, the briefing is about to begin." There was the sound of rustling fabric and scraping chairs as 150 people sat down in the dark. Then, a single sound. The click of a microphone being turned on. Spotlight. A beam of pure white light slammed down onto the center of the stage. I stepped into it. I wasn't wearing the princess dress. I wasn't wearing the veil. I was wearing the white Italian wool suit. My hair was pulled back in a severe, sleek bun. My makeup was sharp. I stood tall, my shoulders back, my chin high. I didn't look fragile. I didn't look unstable. I looked like I was about to give a keynote speech on the total annihilation of an enemy force. I scanned the room. The spotlight blinded me to the details, but I knew exactly where Brandon was. Front row, center table, the seat of honor. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with confusion and fear. Brandon had stopped smiling. I could feel his gaze, a mixture of shock and unease. This wasn't the script. I walked to the microphone stand. I didn't take it off the stand. I leaned in, letting the silence stretch for 5 agonizing seconds. "Good evening," my voice rang out, clear and steady, amplified to reach every corner of the room. "I know many of you are confused. You came here expecting a wedding. Or perhaps, based on the rumors my fiancé has been spreading, you came here expecting a breakdown." I paused. I let that sink in. "You were told that I am unstable. You were told that I am dangerous. You were told that I am a woman on the edge of a crisis." I looked directly at the center table, locking eyes with the shadow that was Brandon. "But the only crisis here tonight," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "is a crisis of character." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. "Brandon Miller came here tonight thinking he was the audience," I said. "But he forgot one thing." I clicked the remote. Behind me, the massive LED screen that spanned the entire back wall of the stage flickered to life. It wasn't a slideshow of our romantic engagement photos. It was a giant, high-definition projection of the Excel spreadsheet titled Exit Strategy. A collective gasp ripped through the room. "He forgot," I said, my voice turning to steel, "that he is the show." I smiled, cold and sharp. "Welcome to the funeral of our toxic relationship." The hum of the giant LED screen was the only sound in the room. Behind me, the spreadsheet glowed in high definition. Every row, Every column, every calculated betrayal was magnified to 20 feet tall. "What is this?" Brandon's voice cracked from the front table. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "Turn it off! Katie, turn it off right now. She's hacking my files. This is illegal." I didn't flinch. I didn't even look at him. I looked at the audience. "This," I said, pointing the remote at the screen, "is a document titled Exit Strategy. It was created 3 months ago. While we were touring venues, Brandon was calculating the depreciation value of my engagement ring. While we were tasting cakes, he was researching how to break our lease without penalty by claiming I was mentally unfit." I clicked the remote. Slide 1, the rehearsal. The spreadsheet vanished, replaced by a video player window. "But spreadsheets are boring," I said. "Let's look at something a bit more theatrical." I pressed play. The audio boomed through the high-quality speakers of the event hall. It was the echoey sound of a bathroom. On screen, giant-sized Brandon stared into a mirror, adjusting his tie. "You're crazy!" the on-screen Brandon yelled. Then he stopped, shook his head, and muttered, "No, more emotion. Squeeze the eyes." The room gasped. On screen, Brandon took a deep breath, contorted his face into a mask of fake agony, and tried again. "Katie, I can't do this. You're scaring me. You're unstable." Then he smirked at his own reflection. Nailed it. In the real world, the silence was absolute. It was the silence of 100 people realizing they had been played. I watched Brandon. All the color had drained from his face. He looked like a ghost. He looked at Mr. Henderson, his boss. Mr. Henderson wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at Brandon with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "He practiced," I said into the microphone. "He rehearsed my heartbreak like it was a sales pitch." I clicked the remote again. Slide 2. The receipt. A bank statement appeared. I'd highlighted the relevant lines in neon yellow. "Now let's talk about finances," I said, my voice crisp. "Brandon told many of you that he was worried about my spending. He said I was financially irresponsible." I used the laser pointer feature on the remote. The red dot danced over a line item. Date: Oct. 14. Merchant: Hermes, Portland. Amount: $2,500. Source: Joint Savings Account. House Fund. "That is a $12,000 charge for a Hermes Birkin bag," I narrated. "Paid for with the money I saved from my deployments, the money we were saving for a house." I looked down at the front table. "Jessica, that's a lovely bag you have under your chair. Is it heavy?" "It should be. It cost me 4 years of combat pay." Every head in the room swiveled to Jessica. She turned a deep, violent shade of crimson. She grabbed her purse, the very bag in question, and tried to hide it behind her back. But the movement only drew more attention. "Thief!" someone whispered loudly. It sounded like Brandon's mother. "But the personal betrayal isn't enough," I continued, my tempo accelerating. "See, Brandon doesn't just lie to me. He lies to everyone." I clicked the remote one last time. Slide 3. The kill shot. This was the nuke. It was a screenshot of a group chat named The Wolf Pack between Brandon, Tyler, and Josh. The text bubbles were massive, legible even from the back of the room. Brandon: "Just closed the Henderson account. Old man is clueless. Tyler: "Nice. How much commission?" Brandon: "Huge. I oversold him on the premium package. He doesn't need half that shit, but he's too senile to read the fine print. I'm milking that old cow for everything he's got." Josh: "What about the chaotic wife?" Brandon: "She's good for the image. Clients love a hero story. Once I get the promotion, I'll dump the soldier and upgrade to the model." The room didn't gasp this time. It froze. Mr. Henderson stood up slowly. He was a man of 60, dignified, with silver hair. He picked up his napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. He looked at Brandon. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're fired, son." Then he turned and walked out. That was the trigger. Brandon snapped, The facade of the cool, collected alpha male shattered completely. He let out a roar, a primal, ugly sound of rage, and lunged. He knocked over his chair. He shoved Jessica aside, sending her sprawling onto the floor in her red dress. He sprinted toward the stage, his eyes wild, veins bulging in his neck. "You bitch!" he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "I'll kill you! Turn it off!" The crowd screamed. I didn't move. I didn't step back. I stood my ground, watching him come. I calculated the distance, 10 meters. 5 meters. He reached the stairs of the stage. "Stop!" It wasn't me. It was Natalie. She stepped out from the shadows of the DJ booth like a phantom. She didn't have a weapon in her hand. She didn't need one. As Brandon bounded up the first step, reaching for my legs, Natalie moved. It was a textbook takedown. She swept his leg, used his own momentum against him, and slammed him face first into the hardwood floor of the stage. Thud. The sound of his expensive tuxedo hitting the wood echoed through the hall. Before he could scramble up, 2 of my old unit buddies, Mike and Rodriguez, were there. They had been waiting by the wings. They grabbed Brandon by the arms, hauled him to his feet, and pinned his arms behind his back in a standard detainment hold. Brandon struggled, thrashing like a caught fish. "Let go of me. This is assault. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you." He looked at me. His face was red, sweaty, and twisted with hate. "Katie, tell them to let me go. You can't do this to me. I'm your fiancé." I looked down at him from the podium. The room was silent again, watching the wreckage of a man who thought he was untouchable. I slowly unclipped the microphone from the stand. I walked to the edge of the stage, my heels clicking softly on the floor. I stopped just inches from his face. I looked him in the eye. I didn't see the man I loved. I didn't see a partner. I saw a threat that had been neutralized. "You're not my fiancé, Brandon," I said, my voice calm, amplified, filling the room. "You're a liability." He sputtered. Don't you dare walk away from me." I signaled to Mike and Rodriguez. "Escort him off the premises. And Jessica, too." "You can't do this," Brandon screamed as they began to drag him backward. "Who do you think you are?" I smiled. A real smile this time. "I'm the logistics sergeant," I said. "And you don't have the clearance to speak to me anymore." I turned my back on him. Behind me, the sound of him being dragged out the double doors was the sweetest music I had ever heard. The screen behind me went black. I looked out at the stunned audience. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Please enjoy the open bar. The drinks are on Brandon." The silence that followed Brandon's ejection was different from the silence at the beginning of the night. It wasn't tense. It was the heavy final silence of a building that has just been demolished. The screen behind me was dark. The security team, my old unit buddies, had done their job with surgical precision. Brandon was gone, dragged out the back exit, his threats of lawsuits fading into the night air. But the wreckage remained. I stood on the stage, watching the fallout. This was the part of the operation called damage assessment. Mr. Henderson, the CEO of the firm Brandon worked for, was the first to move. He was a man who prided himself on dignity, on old-school business ethics. He looked down at the table where his drink sat, a glass of expensive scotch that Brandon had undoubtedly charged to the company card. Mr. Henderson picked up the glass. For a second, I thought he was going to drink it. Instead, he held it out over the polished concrete floor. He opened his hand. Smash! The sound of the crystal shattering was sharp and violent. It was a deliberate echo of what Brandon had done to my ring in the bistro, a callback to the moment this war began. "He called us cows," Mr. Henderson said, his voice shaking with quiet fury. He looked around at his fellow partners. "He called us cows to be milked." He pulled out his phone. "I want legal on the line, now. I want his access badges revoked, his company car seized, and I want a forensic audit of every expense report he's filed in the last 5 years. If he bought so much as a pack of gum with firm money, I want him prosecuted." That was the sound of a career dying. Then the focus shifted to the floor near the front table. Jessica was still there. She had scrambled to her feet, smoothing down her red dress, but the arrogance was gone. She looked small. She looked like exactly what she was, a 22-year-old girl who had played a game she didn't understand and lost. She could feel the eyes of the room on her. The wives of the partners were looking at her with undisguised contempt. The Hermes bag comment hung in the air like a foul smell. She looked at the exit where Brandon had disappeared. Then she looked at the crowd. "I didn't know," she stammered, her voice high and thin. "He told me they were separated. He told me she was crazy." Nobody said a word. The judgment was absolute. Jessica let out a sob, a real one this time, of pure humiliation. She didn't run after Brandon. She turned and sprinted toward the side exit, her heels clacking frantically, clutching the $12,000 bag that was now nothing more than evidence of theft. 2 down. Finally, I looked at the family table. Brandon's mother was weeping into a napkin, muttering about how I had ruined everything. His father just sat there, staring at his hands, looking like he aged 10 years in 10 minutes. They were enablers, yes, but tonight they were just parents watching their son's public execution. But next to them stood Addison. She wasn't crying. She was standing tall. She looked across the room, over the heads of the shocked guests, and locked eyes with me. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hand and gave me a thumbs up. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. It was the confirmation that I hadn't just destroyed a villain. I had saved the people who were willing to be saved. I stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted for me. It was biblical. People pulled their chairs in, stepped back, creating a wide aisle for me to walk through. No one tried to stop me. No one tried to ask questions. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. I walked past the table where table 5 sat. A man in a sharp gray suit stood up. "Ms. Walker?" he asked. "Yes," I said, stopping. "I have the papers ready," he said, tapping a briefcase. "Restraining order, defamation suit, and the civil claim for the misappropriated funds." "Good," I nodded. "Serve him in the parking lot. He should still be screaming out there." "With pleasure." I continued walking. My heels clicked on the floor, a steady, rhythmic beat. Left, right, left, right. I reached the heavy double doors at the front of the venue. The doorman, a burly guy who had looked bored when I arrived, now rushed to open the door for me. He looked at me with genuine respect. "Good night, ma'am," he said. "Drive safe." "Thank you," I said. I stepped out into the night. The air in Portland was cool and damp, smelling of rain and pine. I took a deep breath. My lungs expanded fully, without the constriction of anxiety, without the weight of impending doom. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't holding my breath. I could hear shouting in the distance. Brandon's voice, shrill and desperate, probably arguing with the security guards or the lawyer. "I'll sue her, do you hear me? I'll take everything she has." I paused for a moment, listening to his impotent rage. Yesterday that voice would have terrified me. Today? It sounded like background noise. It sounded like a problem that had been logged, processed, and archived. I walked to my car. I didn't look back at the venue. I didn't look back at the shattered glass or the ruined reputation. I got into the driver's seat. I didn't slam the door this time. I closed it gently. I sat in the quiet. My hands were on the steering wheel, but they weren't shaking. They were steady. I checked the time. 20. The operation was complete. The objectives had been met. The target had been neutralized. I started the engine. The radio came on low, a classic rock station playing something upbeat. I put the car in gear and pulled out of the lot, leaving the chaos in my rearview mirror. The war was over. Now I just had to figure out what to do with the peace. Portland in October is usually a gray, weeping watercolor painting. But today, for the first time in weeks, the sun had broken through the cloud cover, turning the wet pavement into a mirror that reflected the blue sky. It has been exactly 30 days since the event, as my friends now call it. I sat in the corner of Coava Coffee Roasters, my favorite local spot. It's an old industrial warehouse converted into a cafe. High ceilings, exposed wood, the smell of roasting beans and rain. It's the kind of place Brandon hated. He called it too hipster, and pretentious. He preferred chains where the coffee tasted like burnt sugar and the lighting was fluorescent. But Brandon isn't here anymore. The last I heard, via a very satisfied text from Addison, he had been quietly let go from his firm for violating the code of ethics. The lawsuit from Mr. Henderson regarding the misappropriated funds was settled out of court to avoid further scandal, but it drained Brandon's savings dry. He moved back to Ohio to live with his parents. As for Jessica, she quit the day after the party. Rumor has it she's working at a boutique in the Pearl District now, but she keeps her head down. I took a sip of my pour-over coffee. It was black, rich, and complex. It tasted like freedom. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I opened it and tipped the contents onto the wooden table. The diamond ring, 2 carats, platinum band, princess cut. It sparkled in the shaft of sunlight coming through the window. For a long time, looking at this ring used to make my stomach tighten. It represented a promise that was a lie. It represented the nights I spent crying in the bathroom while he texted someone else. It represented the heavy, suffocating weight of trying to be perfect for a man who only wanted a prop. Technically, under Oregon law, an engagement ring is a conditional gift. If the marriage doesn't happen, the ring goes back to the giver. But there was a loophole, a beautiful logistical loophole. I had the receipts. I had the bank statements proving that I had paid for 60% of this ring. Brandon had put it on his credit card to get the points, but he had made me transfer the cash to cover the payments, claiming his bonus hadn't come in yet. He never paid me back. So, legally, this wasn't a gift. It was an asset I had purchased. And today, I was liquidating the inventory. I picked up the ring. It felt light. It no longer carried the weight of his expectations. I stood up and walked out of the coffee shop, heading 2 blocks down to the Portland Estate jewelry buyers. I had an appointment. The transaction took 20 minutes. The appraiser was professional. He didn't ask why a woman was selling an engagement ring alone. He just inspected the stone, nodded, and wrote a check. $12,000. I walked out of the shop with the check in my hand. I could have used this money for a vacation. I could have bought a new wardrobe. I could have put it toward a new car. But that felt wrong. This money was tainted by the past. To truly move forward, I needed to transmute it. I needed to turn this symbol of oppression into a tool of liberation. I got into my car and drove across the Burnside Bridge. The city spread out before me, the Willamette River sparkling below. I drove straight to the local chapter of the Women Veterans Support Fund. It's a small organization that helps female veterans transition back to civilian life, helping them with housing, job placement, and therapy for PTSD. The same PTSD Brandon had mocked, the same trauma he had weaponized against me. I walked into the office. The receptionist, an older woman named Sarah who had served in the Gulf War, looked up and smiled. "Hi, Katie. Good to see you. You here to volunteer for the supply drive?" "Not today, Sarah," I said. I placed the check on her desk. Sarah picked it up. Her eyes widened behind her glasses. She looked at the number, then at me, then back at the number. "Katie, is this real?" she whispered. "This covers our counseling budget for 6 months." "It's real," I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest that was better than any adrenaline rush. "Consider it a logistical reallocation of resources." Sarah stood up and came around the desk. She didn't say anything else. She just hugged me. It was a soldier's hug, firm, grounding, and full of unspoken understanding. "You're going to save lives with this," she said into my ear. "No," I pulled back and smiled. "We are saving each other." I left the center feeling lighter than I had in years. The ghost of Brandon was gone. The shame was gone. The anger was gone. I drove back to my apartment, which I had redecorated. The beige walls were gone, painted a crisp, clean sage green. The leather sofa Brandon loved was replaced by a soft, velvet sectional. I sat down at my desk by the window. I opened my journal. For months, my journal entries had been lists of anxieties. Did I say the wrong thing? Is he mad at me? How can I fix this? Today, the page was blank. I picked up my pen. I thought about the word discipline. For so long, Brandon had made me feel like my military background was a flaw. He made me feel like my discipline was rigid or cold. He tried to strip it away to make me softer. But he was wrong. I wrote, "Discipline is not a cage. Discipline is the armor you build to keep the chaos out. Discipline is having the self-respect to say no. Discipline is knowing that you are a high-value asset and refusing to let anyone treat you like a discount item." I looked at the words. I realized that the logistics of revenge wasn't really about destroying Brandon. That was just the cleanup operation. The real mission was reclaiming Katie. And mission accomplished. I closed the journal. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror in the hallway, the same mirror where I used to critique my body, checking for flaws that Brandon might point out. I looked at the woman in the reflection. She was wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt. Her hair was messy. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked tired, yes. But she looked whole. A song started playing from my neighbor's apartment. Something classic, maybe Fleetwood Mac. I felt a bubble of laughter rise in my throat. I smiled. It wasn't the polite, tight-lipped smile of a politician's wife. It wasn't the apologetic smile of a woman trying to keep the peace. It was a radiant, messy, uncontainable smile. A smile that reached my eyes and crinkled the corners. I was 27 years old. I was a sergeant. I was a survivor. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't reporting for duty to anyone but myself. I grabbed my keys. The sun was still shining. I had a whole city to explore, and I didn't have to ask anyone for permission. I opened the door and stepped out into the light. Before I go, I want to leave you with one final briefing. We often think of revenge as something bitter, but the best revenge is actually just aggressive self-care. In logistics, we have a rule: never expend high-value assets on low-value targets. Your energy, your tears, and your love are high-value assets. Do not waste them on people who treat you like an option or a prop. True discipline isn't about punishing yourself. It is the ability to look at a toxic situation, calculate the cost to your soul, and have the strength to say, "Too expensive." You are the commander of your own life. Stop letting traitors run your base. Fire anyone who doesn't respect the contract of your heart. Now, I want to hear your field report. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a bomb went off at your dinner table? Did you have to sell a ring, burn a dress, or just walk away to find your peace? Share your story in the comments below. We are building a platoon of survivors here, and your experience might be the survival guide someone else needs to read today. If this story gave you the courage to stand tall, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a mission. And if you are ready to live for yourself, comment "I am the commander" below. Stay strong and carry on.